when did marriage actually come about? Jewish marriage as we know it now.
Literally as we know it now, with all the bells and whistles
Well,
and the canapes.
did they have a... Yeah.
Got to have canapes.
We had it in the
Yeah, reception.
That was
Yeah, it's true. That's how you know it's a kosher function.
Was it? Yeah.
It was always
Like, when did we invent egg and cress? When did we invent egg and cress bridge rolls? That's the real question. It's evolved. The concept of marriage has existed, we know, biblically. We've seen the story of Jacob, Isaac,
They
like...
all had many wives. I mean... But
Yeah, but it's the same
are we
process.
talking about many women or actual wives?
It's...
the same process.
Okay,
They all went
so...
to chuppah and
Yeah.
the-
Okay, so that's that. Okay,
So
unless I've
the
misunderstood.
grass
Oh, so that sort of... Okay, no, the actual, with all the bells and whistles ceremony that we have now, with Johnny Turgle singing and stuff like that, I'm not sure when we rounded off that. It seems it's in the times of the Talmud, which isn't that long after the story of Ezra, but we're very clear that before that there was a formal institution of marriage, and there was a formal... There are certain boxes in the Torah that need to be ticked, without which it's not called a marriage. Okay?
Yeah, the matriarchs all got the wife and they had to pay the father-in-law.
Yeah,
There was
there's
a son,
there's
there was a brother
An
there
exchange
involved.
of money, you
It
think?
was a, yeah. it was
some, I mean, like a
contract.
ketubah, yeah, that
Yeah.
you're all familiar with. Now, it was the exact language, has that? No, because it's Aramaic, which means it comes from Talmudic times, but there's clear, not just hints, but clear mentions in the much earlier works, including in scripture, that marriage involves some sort of contract handed over from husband to wife. So there are elements that we have nowadays that I think of, yes, we've developed and they've been embellished and turned into much more of a ceremony, but the core elements have always been there.
But in those days you could have many wives and you went
Correct.
through a ceremony
Yes,
with each of them.
Yeah. and there's a discussion of what the difference would have been between a wife and a concubine, which is also a very biblical question to have, that stopped applying once the ceremony had become formalised. There are still some Sephardi communities where polygamy is fine. It's the Ashkenazim who prohibited it first. It was Rabbeinu Gershom, who was the founder, basically, of Ashkenazi Judaism. Doesn't mean he invented gefilte fish, but he was the first to say that polygamy doesn't work, so stop doing it. But the ceremony, the formalities have always been there. They have evolved over time.
Just go back to see when they first started officiating people to be able to actually
And
create
recording
that,
it, and recording it as well.
create that approach. Because you'd have to have someone to officiate it, right? And to sign it off.
It would seem you'd need at the very least, and I may be just spouting my own ignorance here, but at the very least you'd need kosher witnesses who know that at least one of the boxes has been ticked, and who also therefore know that the status of husband and wife is what we'd call suitable for Jewish marriage. The dilemma is, which is interesting about what comes up in Ezra, and it may have been from their own ignorance that they thought this, the in Torah law, I say this very carefully, intermarriage is not a marriage. It's a relationship, and it doesn't mean we deny there can be deep feelings of love and affection, but it's not a halachic marriage, nor can it ever be. As we've just read the verses that prescribe it. So, Lucy, you could go through the whole, with all the bells and whistles, and the mushroom vol au vents, go through all of it, yeah? You can have a swan carved out of ice, but it's not a chuppah, it's not a marriage, halachically.
Yes, when this, the chuppah became a thing, probably, I mean, Yaakov got the wrong wife under the chuppah, and she was covered.
She was under a chuppah.
We
She
don't
was
know if it was
covered
under a
somehow.
chuppah, I don't know.
And given, and then
Yeah.
he found out.
I don't know, yeah.
And she had the simanim and all that, so that it kind of shows that there was a ceremony because she had to give him the simanim. So
Yeah,
it
there
was a
was,
part.
yeah,
Maybe there
some
was just
sort.
a party and a feast.
Yeah.
No one said later, this isn't a real marriage, it's not valid, because it's not the one you intend. No one
Because
said
they
that.
kind of celebrated
Correct.
as a feast, and she
Yeah.
was given, and they
Although
signed
later on that could have become a thing, which is interesting. Yeah, complication, but
Would have to be a rabbi? That was my question. Would have to be a
Ah,
rabbi
that.
to officiate? And
Yeah, because
Well,
also Moshe didn't exist with the wife.
Yeah,
Moshe
exactly.
came after
When did that all
the
start?
first marriage. Like
Was
we
that
say,
before or after the following?
Chupat Moshe.
I would guess, I'm really, this is all just a semi-educated guess.
We need
No,
a
I
session
would
on
guess, I
marriage.
have to research more, I would guess it's from once the Talmud, which is sort of 2nd to 4th century, once the Talmud formalised things into, because a lot of what we do now, it's right there. They did it in their own way, with their own culture, and their a different language or whatever, but the basics of it are there. I think that's where that kicked in, that there would need to be an officiant.
Right.
You know, once we've got the formula, someone needs to now deliver the formula in the correct way. Yeah.
It says Taylor Swift now Jewish, but Adam Sandler married her.
Is he Jewish?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Didn't know. Wow.
No, I don't really follow Taylor Swift.
No, I follow that she had the big.
I'm
she
aware
had
that
big
she's
wedding
dating
with
some NFL player.
Yeah,
Not married,
they had-
Adam
they just-
Sandler officiated the
Adam Sandler officiated.
Yeah.
Apparently.
What?
And it was in the NBA.
Taylor Swift's husband's Jewish,
No, neither of them are Jewish.
but Adam Sandler, Rabbi Adam Sandler, officiated.
That's a complete insight.
Okay, so Taylor Swift's now Jewish. Yeah, we'll claim her. We'll claim her. That gives us some clout. Okay. Yeah.
Into the soul.
Yeah.
Next
Yeah.
character.
You'll see when someone's doing a fundraiser, she'll magically become Jewish for the purposes of the fund. You'll see. Possible reasons. Number 5. Possible reasons. Shlomo HaMelech says in Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, and you'll be familiar with this because until I came along, Stanmore sang it at a mitzvah. It goes, Shema b'ni musar avicha. Yeah, what happened to that?
Yes.
Yeah, because old Scrooge here got rid of
Oh,
it.
it's beautiful. Why did
Really?
you stop it? Yes.
Because
Yeah, so
it
just
seems that
realised I
many
love
people
that.
disagreed with your assessment of its beauty.
Oh.
Adam has to keep
I don't
still.
have a view.
You're not allowed to have a view. You know, it's the HOs.
I haven't come
Yeah.
across it until I moved
We'll
to
do
South.
Drake's again and I'll sing it to him. No problem. Heed, my son, the instruction, Musar avicha, the instruction of your father. V'al, very important from King Solomon's perspective. V'al titosh Toras imecha. Do not forget the Torah of your mother. We recognize that in most cases, the mother exerts a more considerable influence on a child's upbringing, spiritual upbringing, than the father. Indeed, and it was someone spoke about Eve. Eve's punishment after we ate from the tree was she was assigned with the task of raising children. That does not mean that men are exempt. It means the onus and responsibility was placed on her shoulders, whereas the onus and responsibility of developing and cultivating the world and domesticating a chaotic world was placed on the shoulders of the masculine. So, but Sarah Tel Dibonim was that the pain of raising children was placed upon the feminine energy. So we recognize that the instruction, the discipline, the do's and the don'ts, the following the straight and the narrow, that comes from the father. But who is it? Imagine it. I'll give you the following analogy. This is how I see it. You ever done paint by numbers? Yeah? So what does it look like before you've put brush to paper? You've just got boundaries, you've got guidelines, you've got the lines are there, the shapes are there, the forms are there, the numbers are there, but it looks horrible, doesn't it? The way I see it in an analogy, that's what Dad does. Dad is, these are the lines, these are the rules, these are the do's, these are the don'ts. You'd be sensible to put this paint there, that paint there, that paint there. What do those colours look like? I don't have a clue. Speak to Mum. Speak to your mother about that. So the colour, the spirit, the emotion, the depth of feeling, bringing that picture to life, in Judaism we recognise is the mother's responsibility, and indeed she exerts more considerable influence. So when things come to status, yeah, just who you are, what tribe are you from? Are you a Cohen? Are you a Levi? Are you Yisrael? Like, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Yeah, that comes from the father. But what to do with that status? Now that you're a Cohen, how much does that mean to you? How much are you going to live and breathe your life as a Cohen? How much are you going to enjoy going to the temple and serving? Or as a Levi, how much are you going to enjoy singing in the choir? Not at Stanmore, at Shema B'ni, but in the temple. That stuff in our tradition comes from the mother. The feeling behind the what. So the what is the father, and the what am I going to do with it is the mother. Okay. Question then. We're actually going to skip the next two, jump to the last one, Kabbalistically, because the last two actually I've put in more detail in the last section. Kabbalistically as well, we've mentioned this a number of times, that marriage, and Carl, I think, raised a very good question about multiple wives and reincarnation, yeah? Two halves of a whole. We've understood that the marriage is the two halves of the soul coming together. We've also analysed, and Mark, I don't know if you were here for this one. Were you here for the soul? What is a soul?
I think it was, we were upstairs.
Afterlife
Yeah.
thing.
We were here.
We'll be here. I think that was the first one we did here.
Okay.
So we analysed there are too many authorities to ignore who say there is a difference. I say this very carefully and with respect. There is a difference between a Jew and non-Jewish soul. Doesn't mean we're better, but it means we're different. The difference, in fact, the one that I found spoke to me the most. There are varying approaches to this. Some say the difference is vast, others say it's quite subtle. It's one of those approaches which is actually vast and subtle, which we mentioned is the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato. Sorry, not the Ramchal, Rav Chaim Volozhin, same name. Rav Chaim Volozhin, he says, if you remember this, the difference between a Jewish and non-Jewish soul is the Jewish soul is tapped into the entirety of creation. Which means if a Jew does something wrong, it brings darkness into the whole creation. If a Jew does something right, it brings light and good into the whole creation. A non-Jewish soul does not have that connection to all of creation, and therefore it is different. This isn't necessarily something I would advise going into with children, because it's way too abstract to start talking about practically with, dating out, marrying out. But for our own awareness, one of the reasons that we see intermarriage as a problem is that it is the meeting of two souls that are different. They have different callings. One soul is called to be a good person, and the other soul is called not just to be a good person, but to leave behind a better world than it found. Literally, that's what we're impacting. And to add to this, Kabbalistically, it would seem that that part of the soul is inherited from the mother. Don't ask me to explain how that works, because I don't know. But that part of the soul is inherited from the mother. It's a matrilineal, as it were, passage. There's several reasons that are given. Some are more abstract than others. Some are more philosophical, some are more psychological. But we have a clear number of reasons as to why we might follow this. Okay. So, for our children, then. Yeah, for our children. How do we approach this? I've got...
So you're not going to go through those reasons.
Sorry?
The reasons you just stated. We're not going to go through all of those.
We can stop and analyse them, yeah. Do you want me to summarise them? Summarise them. For matrilineal. Possible explanations for matrilineal descent. Explanation number one is because according to the Talmudic reading, the Torah said so. That's explanation one. The Torah said so, and it said, he will cause your son to go astray, still called your son, so he's clearly Jewish. That's it. As we say, shoin in Yiddish. That's it. No more. But we might want to understand that a bit more. So we've suggested a number of reasons. Reason number one is that, as we've said, and again, I'll repeat it and summarise it, the what you are, who you are, patrilineal. If father tells you who you are, what your status is, where you're inheriting, what tribe you're from, say to that father. But the Jew in you, which is what am I going to do now that I know who I am? What am I going to do with it? That branch of education. There's the instruction of your father and the Torah of your mother. So the spirituality and the emotional depth of the child's connection to Judaism, we say comes from the mother. Now, Kabbalistically, as I've said, to build on that, it is a bit abstract. But Kabbalistically, we understand that the Jewish element of the soul is inherited somehow, metaphysically, is inherited from the mother. So those are two reasons, one more psychological, educational, and the other more esoteric, abstract, for matrilineal descent. Okay? Now, if we can, let's conclude with, hopefully this will be somewhat helpful, I've got the 10 commandments of intermarriage, okay, 10 rules. Feel a bit like Jordan Peterson, 10 rules for tidying your room. Okay, 10 rules. Rule number one, this is to hopefully make it more practical, more applicable. Have the conversation and have it early. Okay? Nothing I'm going to say here is radically unexpected or surprising. Don't wait for, doesn't mean it's too late. I did years ago, I always remember it, I ran a Shabbaton for young professionals, and we did a session about intermarriage. And I was approached at the end by one of the participants, lovely girl, really like a lot going for her, really, really lovely, wasn't actually from the UK, and she said, in confidence, she's like, I'm dating a guy I met in university, very normal, met a guy in university in a bar, whatever it was, and I don't know what to do. She's like, it was a very thought-provoking session, and I'm having second thoughts about it, I don't know what to do. So I said, how long have you been dating? She said, almost a year. So I said, I was a bit rude, shouldn't have been, I was young and immature. I said, it's not fair. I didn't say it's too late. I said, you've put me in a position it's just not fair, because you're now fully emotionally invested in him. I'm sure he's a lovely person. You're emotionally invested in him. So I said, I'm not just contending with your decision, I'm contending with your decision that's got the weight of all your emotions on it as well, and the emotions of a guy who I've never met, who isn't asking me this question, who I'm sure is lovely, but he might not be interested to hear my opinion. In fact, he might run a million miles away because he's scared I might break you up. So have the conversation and have it early, like a theoretical conversation.
Surely we just discussed that if she's Jewish, marrying a non-Jewish, it was so bad.
Yeah.
Not so bad, but...
So this is
So
what's good.
So what's like the most is the daughters shouldn't marry. No, your sons shouldn't marry non-Jewish women.
Both.
Because if
Both.
it's going from the mum, surely it's more important.
It's certainly
I mean,
more of
it shouldn't
okay.
be at all.
This
But
is
if you
going to
had
be up to
pick
every
and choose-
individual person. I've spoken to many people who have said to me to my face, it's not a big deal because the kids are going to be Jewish.
So what do you say?
I sometimes have to bite my tongue.
Is it better though? It's better than the other way.
Technically, yeah. But as the statistics, we have the
Yeah.
data. The data is in, and
then kids are
statistically,
going to-
yeah, statistically, all you've done, all one has done, is delay the inevitable by one generation. That's it. Like you've just delayed the inevitable by 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, because you're not going to preach.
And that's
to
why I
those
have to.
kids.
That's
You're
why I
not
have to.
marrying
Yeah.
someone like that.
Yeah.
That's not that compelling for the child in question, is it?
No. What as a
That-
reason not to?
Yes.
No, of course not. No, guilt trips don't work anymore. They don't work. And I'll get to what I think in rule number 3. This is rule number 2. Rule number 1, have the conversation early before it's an emotional mess. And by mess, I don't mean a mess, because they could genuinely, no one's in denial, they could be genuinely in love. They're not just infatuated or besotted by it, they could genuinely really get on with each other. And they make a great couple. The only problem is, now how do I deal with that? The elephant in the room. That's the question. So deal with it and deal with it early before emotion enters the conversation. Rule 2, Lucy, this is your point. Do not center the conversation around negative countermeasures, like what would your grandparents say? Or what about all the people who died in the gas chambers? Correct, lots of people did die in the gas chambers, but that's not a reason to split this young couple up, nor are they ever going to take it seriously. And that's
Because
even
in
those.
Our generation, that
Sorry?
worked. In our generation,
Of course
that
it worked, yes, because you grew up in the shadow of the gas chambers. It was so much more powerful. And this is why I mentioned anecdotally before how we've started seeing among the youngsters that the way they relate to even something as serious and as heavy as the Holocaust, they're not saying it's not important. They're relating to its importance in a radically different way, and it's happened suddenly, and it caught us all by surprise. And it's now normal. This was 2022, and I've heard from many trips since then, dozens of trips, exactly the same thing. So whatever has shifted post-COVID is here to stay. They are now relating to the Holocaust, or they're seeking to relate to it in a very positive, optimistic, hopeful way, and none of those categories apply to splitting up a couple who's in love, because that's not optimistic, it's not hopeful, and it's not a joyous thing to do. So Lucy, you're right. It worked in our generation, saying, your grandparents are turning in their graves. That's all. It worked. Yeah, it worked. Again, we're also dealing with a generation that does not cope well with pain and guilt and trauma at all. It's very, very much avoidant of those things. There was a trend in the 90s, a number of well-meaning, but I believe humbly misguided Rabbonim who published books that said, oh, it's going to end up being a messy, horrible marriage, it's going to end in a messy, horrible divorce, and that's why you shouldn't do it. And it just, like, good luck saying that to two youngsters who all they can see is each other. You know, and all they can think about is each other.
And they'll give you evidence that even Jewish couples get divorced.
Correct.
It's horrible for them.
Correct.
It's
Even
horrible.
Jewish couple. Yeah, you're right. The rates are going up in the religious world as well. Correct. Which leads us to rule number 3, which I believe is the only, and I may be wrong, push back, argue with me, shout at me with pleasure. It's backed up by data though, because the only thing that the only consistent pattern the data shows is that the stronger we are in our Jewish observance, the less likely it is that intermarriage will happen. Now I'm going to translate that into what I hope is United Synagogue terms without meaning at all to be patronizing. That doesn't mean I believe that everyone needs to become Haredi. It doesn't. What it does mean is rule 3. The real talking point when we have this conversation with our children is Jewish values and how much they see that we treasure our heritage. That's it. This is a beautiful thing. This is a thing that we are proud of. This is a thing that we'll make sacrifices for. We're not just asking you to make sacrifices. One of the most painful stories I ever heard was I was approached by the parents of someone who was engaged to marry a non-Jewish girl. So, so the parents are panicking because this means now that the children are going to be not Jewish. They were members of United Synagogue. This is not a family who've grown up in Americans say Yahoo Pittsville, Nowhereville, right? They haven't grown up in the sticks. They grew up in a United Synagogue in London. And the parents approached me and said, can you do an intervention? Like, is Alcoholics Anonymous or something? And I'm like, no, I don't do that sort of thing. I'm happy to have a conversation with the kid, the son, who I knew. Didn't know her, knew him. Sat down, spoke about it. Before I'd even opened my mouth, he said, my parents raised us. This was his words. Every single time, he said, Judaism was inconvenient, they dropped it. Every time something clashed, a golf tournament, a football game, a holiday, every time there was an inconvenience presented by Judaism, you know what won? The inconvenience. Judaism pushed to a side. He said, when I grew up, and he went to a Jewish school, mind you, he said, when I grew up, whenever I had an orthodontist appointment or a dentist appointment or a doctor, any sort of appointment whatsoever, a scan, a checkup whatsoever, he said, you know the lesson my parents always arranged it to clash with because they didn't consider it as important as my other subjects, JS or modern Hebrew, anything, that was the first to go. He's like, even art and PE, which he hated, no, you've got to do those in case you become Michelangelo or something, but God forbid you should, miss history or geography, you'll miss. So he said, yeah, I grew up in a United Synagogue and I grew up knowing about Judaism, but what I also know about Judaism is that whenever life throws you a challenge, Judaism is the first thing that disappears. And then he goes, and this by now it was check. He then moved, rook to square 5 for the checkmate. And he goes, and I tell you something, he says, if my parents loved me or Judaism more than they loved other people's opinion of them, we wouldn't be in this mess. And I was like, I'm out. I'm not paid enough for this. I'm gone. He says, the only reason they've brought you in as some sort of Batman, is because they know all the neighbours are going to talk. Because my kids, with the woman I love, are not going to be Jewish. And he says, no, I don't care. They're not going to be Jewish because my parents didn't care either. They only care because the community is going to talk.
I say well done to this child because
I said that as well.
I
was like, thank you for being honest.
The parents need to
Yeah.
learn. That's their tikkun. It's
Yeah.
almost like karma
Yeah.
is getting to them. It's really sad. Though.
I know there was nothing
Hopefully,
in
yeah,
that
it's a good
situation,
marriage.
and the mother then called me and said, well, how did it go? I'm like, well, it didn't quite go as you think. Are they still together? They're not just still together, they're more committed than they were before I started. So, and of course there's nothing I could say, because what's the point? You can't, and it's a scary thing, you can't turn back 20 years and raise that child again. It's done.
Yeah.
So I said I advise them, as I would for anyone who's facing this situation, whether or not they've raised their child in such a, forgive me for saying it, hypocritical atmosphere where Judaism is clearly not a priority unless it's on show, right? Unless it's on show for the community. What I advise anyone in that situation is you now have to switch out of this negativity and the guilt tripping. You have to embrace the situation, and you're going to start dealing with it positively. Again, because this generation feeds off of positivity, not guilt. Let's push forwards. For some reason, I've skipped rule 4, which means we don't have 10 commandments. There's only 9 of them. So the first commandment... Oh, well, there's 2 sevens. Yeah, this is me at 2 a.m. again. It's me at 2 a.m. because I stupidly, after Havdalah, tuned into the second half of the England game, and I thought, oh, it's fine, I'll do the sheer preparation after that, and I was exhausted. So we have 2 rule 7s, which means that rule 4 is to remember, which this young man taught me, we love our children more than we love others' opinions about us. That is fundamentally true. And not only is it true, it is expected of us from Hashem. Whatever our children are doing, whatever they're doing, and I mean that in the fullest extent of the expression, our love for them comes before our love for what other people think about us, as difficult as that may be. The next rule, which is also difficult, and I encounter this a lot, and I get it back from my kids a lot, who've often pronounced me, and I quote, the worst parent in the world. I'm sure I am, but my parents were also the worst parents. I'm sure all of your parents were the worst parents in the world at various stages of teenagehood, right there. They
need to read David Williams' Worst Parents and then read
it. Yeah. No, but we've all of us have had the worst parents in the world. We all know that. When we're teenagers, everyone has the worst parents in the world. This doesn't mean, our love for them doesn't mean that we celebrate all of their decisions. And we recognise this everywhere, don't we? If, God forbid, our kids go off to university, and it happens a lot, we notice that they may be partying a bit too often and a bit too hard, out of concern for their well-being and their health, and to avoid, God forbid, developing an addiction, substance addiction, we would say, because I love you, I'm not celebrating your behaviour, and I'm flagging with you. This is actually a Jordan Peterson thing. I don't like a lot of his stuff. But I think what he says is true. We're in a generation where we've all become very scared of disliking things our children do. Doesn't mean we dislike our kids, but it means we say very firmly, very clearly, unequivocally, what you are doing, I don't advise. I don't agree with it. Yeah. Now, we say that with almost everything. And again, there's some sort of mental block. The way I've heard it presented to me, again, very much by United Synagogue families, is there's a fear. I don't want to push them too far in Judaism because then they'll rebel, which has ended up, ironically, with not pushing them at all, which is equally unhealthy, because then the children grow up thinking, well, it doesn't matter, because mum and dad push me on X, Y, A, B, C, D, F, G, everything they push me. They push me on my exams, they push me on my health, they push me on my social life, they push me on what I'm wearing, they push me on what I'm eating, all these things, I hear their input, but they don't say anything about my Jewish life, which means, in the mind of a 14, 15-year-old, who's going to start thinking about dating very soon, well, it doesn't matter. So we have to find the right balance of raising, I don't agree. Doesn't mean that I don't like the boy or girl that you're dating. Doesn't mean that I think they're a bad person. But I don't agree with what you're doing. And again, to be coming back to rule 3, the reason I don't agree with it is because I celebrate Judaism. And I think that Judaism is the greatest thing in the world. That does not mean... I want to make this clear. That doesn't mean that I keep every one of the 613 mitzvot. I keep what I'm able to keep. And I keep what I think pushes me to be a better person. But if I had to choose any system, any faith, any ideology that's out there, I pick Judaism every day of the week. That has to be clear to our children, which means that when they have orthodontist appointments, the last lesson, even though they hate their JS teacher, they have to see from us, I value the fact that you are in a Jewish school. That's why I sent you in the first place. Yeah? Especially if it's a private school. That's why I'm paying these fees, is for you to have access to Jewish knowledge. So when you need to go to the orthodontist, I won't make you miss your favourite lessons. You're not going to miss history or maths or whatever it is. But yeah, you're going to miss PE or art or food tech. No disrespect to those subjects. They're fine subjects, yeah? You're going to miss those. You're not missing JS. It's as simple as that. Incentivize this if we need to. It all has to boil down and come back to rule 3. Rule 7, detached curiosity, something I'm working on a lot. I'm probably failing with my own kids, but I'm trying. Detached curiosity. It means observing their behavior from an emotional distance. Yeah, so there's engaged resistance where we're almost in a battlefield with them. I'm sure we've all felt that, especially with teenagers, where you feel like you're in a boxing ring with them and it's a verbal, not certainly physical, it's a verbal boxing ring. Detached curiosity is that I'm actually outside the ring, like I'm in the media scrum. I'm watching from outside, observing. Yeah, and I'll write a report afterwards of what I've seen, but just keep that distance. And the reason they say that is A, because our youngsters, they're not yet emotionally mature. They do not have the shoulders broad enough to deal with all the emotions they're going through, which is a absolute storm of teenage hormones and working out the world, and young person hormones, and university, and figuring themselves out, and worrying about jobs and homes, and love life, and all this sort of stuff. They don't have the emotional capacity to then take on board all of our emotions as well. And again, sorry that I'm being a bit patronizing, but I'm also teaching myself at the same time, bearing in mind that hopefully we are fully mature and developed emotionally, and we're bringing emotions into that space that are 39 years old, and I'll leave you all to fill in your own numbers to that. That's a lot of emotional weight for someone who's 17 to take on board and be expected to change their life as a result. So as hard as it is, at least in the early stages, keep our own emotions out of it. We're almost like a bird's eye view. We're not in the ring with them. Okay. I think this is rule 8 now. Rule 7B, yeah? Rule 8.
It's 9:30, you know this.
Yeah, he's got till 10 too. Rule 8. Meet them, and meet them early. Meet them. I know that sounds crazy, and I know the neighbours will talk. Meet not your kids, the ones they're dating.
What's that one, two? Oh,
Meet
meet
them.
them if they're Jewish or not Jewish?
Not Jewish. Meet them. Because if we don't, if we make either a pointed or a subtle indication that we're just not... The danger of detaching emotion is that we then actually shut down. And I'm just going to ignore it, brush it under the rug. It's what my dad taught me about anti-Semites. If you ignore them, they'll go away. So we can think that, if I ignore this situation, it will go away. Meanwhile, what's happening is that subtly, our children are picking up on the fact that mum and dad don't approve of this, but I don't know why they don't approve, because they've shut down. So this is now a very unhealthy situation. And in the meantime, the only person I'm opening up to, therefore, is my non-Jewish girlfriend or boyfriend. And they're really understanding, obviously, because they're head over heels for me. So they're really understanding of it. So all the while that we're ignoring the situation and ignoring the elephant in the room, they are growing closer and closer together, until eventually the day comes when the conversation won't be, Mum, Dad, what do you think about this? It'll be, Mum and Dad, we're getting married. He's proposing tomorrow. Or he's just booked a trip to Venice, and I think, he's been really his friends have been distracting me every 5 minutes, and I'm sure he's planning something. I saw him looking up, roses and rings and whatever. So I would advise, controversially, again, you've had the conversation early, before they've even started about thinking about dating and love life, okay? The conversation has been framed around Jewish values. This is something that I treasure. And because I treasure it, I want you to treasure it. And because you treasure it, I want you to share it with someone else who treasures it, i.e. they're Jewish as well. This is on the assumption that hasn't worked, that we've done our best to raise our children in a home that is infused with Jewish values and a value of Judaism. It does not mean we're all Haredim. It does not mean that we're all ultra-Orthodox. What it does mean is it's very clear to our children that priority numero uno in every situation, in every consideration, is Judaism. That's very, very clear. Very clear.
So if you're meeting, if your parent, you are parents that are meeting the non-Jewish partner.
Yep.
At that point, are you saying, right, I can't do anything else? Because it looks like you are going for it.
It does, doesn't it? And that's why we don't want to, because if we meet them, it looks like we approve of it. It's like Tevya in Anatevka, yeah?
I mean, you're pulling them into the family.
So this is rule 6. This is Lucy. Where sorry, Carl, go ahead.
By the same token, if you blanket just say no without meeting them, you really haven't. If the child isn't fully sort of enmeshed in the idea of marrying only Jewish, if you refuse to meet the person, you haven't really got a leg to stand on as to why you're
I
disapproving.
know, but you can't just meet them and then not meet them, is what I'm saying.
No,
Once you meet
if
them,
you
you're probably
meet
going
them,
to
you
meet
can't
them again.
cancel them for like, oh, I don't think she's right for you, and ignore that.
Yeah.
because
So the
you're
hope
Jewish,
here,
she's
I'll
right
say
for
two
you.
things. They're important questions. I'll say two things. I may be wildly wrong on this, but my gut tells me Rule 6, which may actually be Rule 5 because I've misnumbered all of it. But again, Lucy, Rule 6 is we have to find a way. We do this with everything else, and I recognise this is the most emotive and most delicate probably that we'll have to do it with. We have to find a way of communicating to our kids, I still love you, but I don't approve of what you're doing. And why I don't approve? I don't approve, but because I love you, I want to meet him, her. You know, I have nothing against him or her.
And
Can I
but
meet them?
Then it will start, and then they come to each family event after that.
Okay, so let's explore. We're going through this sequentially, as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 haven't worked,
Yeah.
and we're now this much further
Yeah.
down the line. So again, I think we're in agreement that by not meeting them and just by shutting down and shutting off, we're just increasing the likelihood that the only time our kids are going to speak to
Yeah.
us is when they're on a plane to Paris or on their way back from Paris with a ring on their finger. So that we're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
By meeting very early, before there's this real emotional connection, we increase the chances that our children, again, we've made it clear, love you very much. I and your mother would prefer that you dated and married Jewish. It seems you've met someone who's not. I'm sure they're a lovely person. We'd love to meet them. They're a part of your life. You're our life. You are our life. We've raised you. We want to meet someone who, you're clearly quite fond of before it's, like I spoke to that girl on the Shabbaton, it's not a year down the line. It's
Yeah.
very, very early days. And I think that increases the chances that our children see, okay, I'm not being shut out, I'm not being exiled from the family, I'm not being struck from the family will. It's a conversation and mum and dad are willing to have it, and I respect that in my own young brain way. It increases the chances of, in that early stages, our child sits down and says, Mum and Dad, what do you think? What do you think?
Yeah.
Now, we can't turn around and say they're the most horrible person ever and I think they're a Nazi and they're terrible and anti-Semitic. That's not going to work. But they're more open to hearing, what do you think about this relationship?
Yes, so you have one sort of almost final chance because of it, because they're more likely to ask you.
Well, it depends on what you want to do. It depends what the destination is. So if the goal is for them to break up, this would be a final chance, possibly. But that isn't the only goal.
There's elements of reverse psychology as well.
Meaning?
Meaning the child is worried about its parents, her parents, being really, really negative about all of this.
Massively worried. Yeah.
But then if all of a sudden you're meeting them and you're kind of, okay, let's see what's going on here, the child may not react as if, I see what you're saying, if the child then doesn't react to all that massive negativity that the parents are giving, they kind of start thinking a little bit more about it. It's if the parents are actually having a go at them and refusing to meet people, it's kind of clouding all of their feelings about it. Let's remove all of that.
Yeah, and it's, as I
then
said,
it allows the child to think a little bit more clearly.
and
about
also it allows the child to continue trusting their parents. Again, none of this can't come from an insincere place. We have to sincerely want to meet the boyfriend, girlfriend. But as I said before, shutting off, which means that doesn't mean ranting and raging at them. It just means I'm indifferent to it. It's that's the danger of detaching, is we can detach too much. What that does is just pushes our kid into their arms because they become the source of comfort, love and trust that we're no longer providing. We have to find a way of providing that at the same time as making it clear that fundamentally I'd prefer you didn't do this. Which we are able to do in other areas. We are able to do this. There will be certain behaviours and behaviour patterns that our kids pursue that we don't like so much, but we're still clear to them that it doesn't diminish the love I have for you. Of course, this is the heaviest one of them all, though, because it's a lifetime decision.
Mm.
So, Rule 7, which may or may not have been Rule 7, opens up another possibility, which is if the conversation is open from very early on in the dating process, it can and probably will at some point, either our children will instigate it, or even the person they're dating may instigate it, which is conversion. So that's, Lucy, what I was saying to you before. Depends what the goal is. If the goal is for them to break up, yes, that probably should be a goal, but if we start recognising that's unlikely to happen, the next goal, absolutely, especially if it's Jewish boy, non-Jewish girl, the goalposts have to shift and it becomes conversion. Have that conversation, and this is again me being a bit controversial, I might be wrong, have it with them in the room, as in the non-Jewish person. Have it with them in the room. And it's the same thing, by the way. We love Judaism. We love being Jewish. We believe that we have a heritage that we've cherished and kept and protected for thousands of years. We've survived against all odds. Give them a summary of 4,000 years of Jewish history. Let them. You've got to know it first. You've got to believe it, and then let them be blown away by it. And at the end of that, say, and we would be delighted to welcome you into our community by conversion. Not quite like, it's not like an elevator pitch. You're not selling them double glazing, and this isn't going to happen in one conversation. It's going to be multiple conversations.
Ask them what they think about Judaism.
Yeah.
What
Have
they
you?
think about
What?
conversion.
They're about to ask you if your son or daughter's hand in marriage. There's nothing wrong with saying, "I'm just interested, curious to hear." We've got to know you now. Obviously, this isn't the first conversation. You don't sit down with them and you like, "What's your name?" "Hi, my name's." "Have you considered, convert?" No. Yeah, it is a bit. Have you got 5 minutes? Yeah. It's a little bit, yeah, creepy. Well, we don't do that. You've really got to know them now. And that's not in an insincere way. You've gone for a round of golf, you play for whatever it is you've done. You've shared a picnic, whatever it is, and it's built up to a point where there's enough now of a relationship, not just between your child and the person they're dating, but you and the person they're dating, to say, again, we love this faith and we love our heritage. Have you considered, the chances are, in this day and age, they have considered it, because they've been looking stuff up online. This isn't 100 years ago, where they'd either look at you like you're mad, or not have a clue what you're talking about. Yeah, they've looked it up online. They've probably even looked at celebrities, Taylor Swift, they've looked at celebrities who may or may not have converted. It's likely they've encountered these ideas. And again, it could be quite interesting to hear their response, and then with your child, sit and unpack that response. Where do you stand on this? What would you prefer? Is this a red line? When you say that you share values with this person and that you're in love with them, we make sacrifices for people we're in love with. So who's sacrificing for who? Which direction is that flowing in? And are the values really aligned? They say that they cherish and value Judaism, but they don't want to do anything about it. So is it genuine? Is that perhaps something that's a bit askew? If just sit, open it up. And then Rule 9, Rule 10 is the most important one, but Rule 9, and then we'll finish with Rule 10, because I know that Lenny has to make a move, which is, again, really, really difficult, and it was the lesson that this young man taught me in that very, very brutal remark he made about his parents and that 11th hour intervention that I got very wrong. yeah. I don't know if he's still married, but yeah, it didn't go as they'd hoped it would go. Be open about it. Really, everyone has challenges that they're working on. No one is perfect. There are so many people in the community who are going to be so supportive. That is absolutely, in this day and age, certainly. Because the disadvantages of it not being as taboo as it was is that the intermarriage rates are going up. But the advantage of it not being as taboo as it was, that people are just more open-minded about it. And that doesn't mean they approve of it, but it means, you even have now like rabbis who are very open about, let's talk about it. Can they come to shul? Yeah, they can come to shul, no problem. I can't call them up to the Torah. There are certain boundaries that we have because, again, and I've said this to people, my love of Judaism and my loyalty to Hashem supersedes my love and loyalty to you, and you have to respect that. But yeah, And the community is, in all likelihood, going to be an amazing support network. They'll be welcoming, and again, all of that, instead of keeping them as like a, Harry Potter in the cupboard under the stairs that is, the Dursleys put away. They don't want to show him in public. Again, this increases goal number 1 is they never meet. Goal number 2 is they meet, but then breaks off. Goal 3 is conversion. It only increases the chances. If they see this is the warmest and most welcoming and most authentic community I've ever seen, that can only increase the chances of conversion. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that goal 3 might not be met either. That's for us to navigate. Who knows? To advise people how to navigate, but to never cut. The days of sitting shiver for a child who married out are long, long gone. Okay, and that was literally what was done. It's still done in some communities, but in the circles that we move in, it is A, counterproductive, and B, likely to make the news in a negative way. So it's not constructive. And Rule 10...
So it was never a halachic requirement in any way?
I don't think it was a requirement. No. As far as I know.
Or the enactment of a halachic?
But it was a visceral reaction. It wasn't, I don't think there was anything inauthentic about it. It was genuine. Yeah, we struggle, again, forgive me for saying this, Middle England, so modern Orthodoxy, our synagogue probably struggles to relate to the heartbreak of someone who's, and it's not heartbreak because of what the community is saying, it's heartbreak because of how much we've given and sacrificed and cherished, and they're now turning. It's that, the most powerful scene, I mentioned it before, the most powerful scene in Fiddler on the Roof is the Chavela, where he's torn between, and you feel 3,000 years of history on his shoulders with his love for his his third daughter. He has 2 more, which comes up in the opening scenes. Thank you for blessing me with this. You feel it. You feel that. And in the end, he turns his back on her because, first and foremost, his identity is a Jew. We can't relate to that anymore because our identities are very much blurred and diluted by other things. So, Rule 10, Doven. That's it, Doven. Rule 10 is the only one that's guaranteed to work. Doven. The rest of them, who knows. Thank you very much for joining. Any final questions? I'll stop the recording here.